Hello, everyone. Our guest today is multi-Grammy-nominated mix engineer, producer, and owner of SoundMind Recording in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania. With credits spanning from Avenged Sevenfold to Swedish rock giants such as Ghost, by the way, whose album Skeleta was mixed straight to #1 on the Billboard 200. Dan Malsch is one of the most in-demand mixers working in the industry today, and he is also a Dolby Atmos pioneer and educator running the SoundMind Recording Academy. Dan, welcome to The Sonic Truth.
Hey guys, how's it going? Thanks a lot for having me and taking the time to talk.
Thanks for stopping by, Dan.
Thanks for having me. It's going to be fun.
So in the beginning of the career, you went from making your own music to producing and engineering for other artists. At what moment was it that you realized, the engineer's chair was meant to be for you?
It's interesting. I'll give you the quick story. I was in a heavy metal band in the late 80s, early 90s. I'm going to say how old I am now. And I always liked the studio side and, getting sounds and that kind of thing, but I never liked being on the stage. I always wanted to be in the back. I always wanted to, kind of have my head down and not be super out front. And I think the switch, the transformation from wanting to be in a band and wanting to be an engineer was we got to do a record with a producer named Jim Morris back in the early 90s. He owned a studio called Morris Sound Recording in Tampa, Florida. They were mostly known for all the death metal, Cannibal Corpse, Gorguts, and they had an SSL 4K there. I think it was a G. And I was always watching Jim working. And I was watching him working more than I was concentrating on the music. And I would ask Jim, can I do a recall for you? Because I would see him do, total recalls. And, it was sometimes a little annoying for the band because I was always up on what's Jim doing with EQs and mics and stuff. So that was kind of where I caught the bug. And then I asked Jim Morris, I said I wanted to enroll in a school. I think Full Sail at the time was one of the only schools. And Jim said, because I'd worked with Jim a while, and he said, no, knowing your personality, it's probably best that you just buy some gear and just start recording some local bands. Because I'm not much of a book reader. I'm more of hands-on. I just get the stuff and bang on it for a while and until it works. So that was really the transformation for me. I love creating music, but I don't like being on the stage and it out front. That's probably why I'm a studio hermit.
That's great. I think we've all kind of been the musician side of it and kind of even embraced, the studio shell or the stage itself.
Yeah.
That's very interesting that your bandmates were viewing you at the console wondering, come on, we need to work on our arrangement. Come on.
Oh, yeah. This guy doesn't even know his guitar parts, and he's messing with the console. That's pretty much what it was.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Now, your studio SoundMind, that is tucked away in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania, which I imagine is just absolutely stunningly beautiful. With that being outside kind of like the major hubs in the music industry, how has that shaped how you work with the clients and how you attract them?
It's interesting because we're actually only about an hour and 10 minutes from Manhattan. And we're really 15 minutes from New Jersey. So, but I used to worry sometimes. I used to talk to my wife about, I'm kind of in the middle of nowhere. I'm not in an A market. I'm probably in a C market. But somehow, because it's a destination studio, we have rooms for people to stay in. It's a big studio. There's plenty of property. So in a way, I think it's helped me. I don't think it's helped me as walk-in. If I was in New York or Nashville, I'd have more people walking in and out, just looking for studio time. But it has helped me with bands that kind of want to get away and not let anyone know that they're here. Like, for instance, Avenged Sevenfold on their last album, they were here for almost 4 months.
Oh, wow.
And no one knew they were here. I think towards the end, they did. People knew they were here because, we'd see some people driving around out front and pulling in the driveway a little bit. But it's been a nice getaway for people. I sometimes crave, because I've been working in my own studio for so long, I sometimes crave, hey, what would it be like if I had a studio in a larger city? But that's just kind of, I don't know. Maybe it's different. I mean, right now I have 50 songs on my plate to mix, so I don't need work.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
it's I don't know, but I like it, but I do sometimes. I mean, it's beautiful. I walk out here, and it's just beautiful. In the winter, not so good. I'm actually I'm actually looking at buying a place somewhere maybe Florida somewhere for the winter months, just to go down and maybe just mix in a little room or something, because the winter killed me a little bit this year. But this time of year, it's absolutely beautiful here. So I guess all in all, it's helped me having being able to have a place this big. This big place is about 10,000 square feet.
Damn.
So I wouldn't be
Yeah.
able to have that.
You wouldn't,
would
once
never
you
be
have
able
that
to.
vibe, that peace and quiet and outdoor vibe, trying to go to a city environment, it's just, yeah. I feel you there, man.
So I think as all in all, it's helped me. Turned out that Andy Wallace was a neighbor of mine. Lived a half hour away. I didn't even know, and that's another fun story. But
I imagine it's turned into more of an experience, for the artist,
yeah,
rather
for
than
sure.
showing up day by day, at a studio in the city, having to deal with traffic. This allows you to stay in your creative mindset.
Yeah,
Excuse me, within one facility, especially in that location. That's got to be good for them. Create,
Yeah.
On the creative vibe.
I think so.
Now, mentioning having your own studio, you recently spent 3 weeks mixing Ghost. Is it Skeleta? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Skeleta.
Yeah, at IMRSV, which is the former EMI studio built in 1969.
Correct.
So what was that like, jumping into someone else's room for a project that high profiled?
Well, I had a couple nervous breakdowns, to be quite honest.
Let's hear 'em.
I'm an open book with this kind of stuff. So I'll give you the short story, because it was pretty long. Andy Wallace and I had finished mixing that record in the summer of, was it 2024, I believe? I can't remember. It was 2023 or 2024. I think maybe 2024. We thought the record was done. It was mixed on my console, the 4K. But Tobias couldn't be in any of the sessions. He was dealing with a lot of stuff in Stockholm. He was building a new house, also building a new studio. And I kind of got the feeling towards the end of the session that they were happy with the record, but not totally happy. I think they were kind of like, we just have to be done. We have to move on. And I think what happened was they burned a test pressing vinyl, and it just wasn't what they wanted. It was a little too bright. There was a lot of things that I don't think were right with that record. Full transparency, and I was involved in it, but I'm not afraid to say it. I think there were a lot of things that weren't right. So I got a call from Tobias's manager. Hey, no, I got a text. Hey, Dan, we have an idea and it involves you. And I said, I always love ideas that involve me. And that's how I left off. And Kristen called me about half an hour later, and she said, hey, Dan, do you want to come to Stockholm with Tobias? We have some tweaks we want to do on the record. Now, the record had already been mastered 3 or 4 times because we couldn't get it right. It just wasn't right. It wasn't a very clean record. I don't know if you've heard the record. Very transparent, very clean. The first version sounded a little too overdriven. It wasn't right. So I said, oh, okay, when? And Kristen was like, next week. So I immediately go, and if I'm going on too long with this, let me know. But I immediately try to find an SSL 4K in Stockholm, because that's what we were working on. I figured, okay, we could start where we left off. I'd bring the floppy disk with me, and we'd start. I couldn't find a 4K. And I actually could find a 4K, but the studio was booked. So I found an SSL Duality, which was a completely different console. It's night and day. There couldn't be 2 totally different consoles. So that's when the panic mode started to set in a little bit. So I called Andy and I said, Andy Wells, I said, here's what's going on. We can't find a 4K, but I found a Duality. And Andy, like always, says, well, I think you'll figure it out. So like, okay, yeah, I'll figure it out.
Back to the studio, throwing the gear in front of you and just learning it. Forget the education.
Of course. So it turns out, I get to Stockholm. I don't know the room at all. The studio's amazing. I'm not the monitoring. I didn't know. I've been using Atom monitors forever. I use a pair of KSD monitors now. I don't know Genelec monitors really well. They're great. I just didn't know them really well.
Yeah.
So I was already tired, jet lagged, trying to figure out the studio, the room. Anyway, so I did the first mix was a song called Satanized. And we had to start the mixes from scratch. There's no recall from
I was going to say
a 4K to, there's no recall. So, Andy kept asking me how the recalls were going, and I kept saying,
they're not.
there's some communication issue. But so we did the first song, Satanized, and, Tobias said, the first song took me about 3 days. It took me a long time to get,
you got to get
Tobias,
the monitoring and everything. It's
I was very unsure.
Yeah.
And Tobias looked over and he said to me, "Hey, can we do them all like that?" I was like, "Oh." I was like, "Yeah, yeah." But we had 10 days, which turned into a little more than 3 weeks. So, turned out it was great. My assistant, Besma Jabbar, she was incredible. She really helped me out with the room, and using a pair of Audio's headphones, which I've never used before. I ended up mixing most of the record on headphones because I connected with those headphones really well. But I think the record turned out great. It's a very clean record, very transparent. I think the duality was maybe a blessing in disguise. It's a really clean console, whereas the 4K has a little bit of grit built in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it made me want to buy a duality. That I like it's a different console. You can't drive it super hard. I remember trying to drive it like I drive my 4K, and it was just not having it. And I was like, "What's going on?" So, but yeah, that was an experience. But that was it was a really, I know I'm going on for a long time with this, but I say to a lot of younger engineers, technically, a lot of us could do the same job. We can, we all know how to work the gear. We all know how to work compressions. But it's being able to actually, in that moment, with lack of sleep, stress, all the producers looking at you, Tobias sitting right next to you, remixing a record that both Andy and I worked on, it's being able to deal with that. That is the real, and deliver. That's the real test. Not about knowing about how to use gear.
It's that pressure that turns it into a diamond.
Yeah, exactly.
So. Now, you mentioned the duality EQs. You felt they were more precise and less broad than the black modules.
Yeah.
Can you break that down, what that actually means for a new engineer and how that would sound on a record?
Sure. Well, I think there's a few things. I think my console's in good shape, but I think my console's getting a little old and a little tired. But in general, I have some of these new SSL Revival 4000 modules, and I believe that's what my console probably sounded like when it was new. So my console's a little. I mean, you gotta turn about 10 dB up of gain to start really hearing what the duality would do with about 2 dB a gain, 3 dB a gain. So the duality is a little more surgical to me. And the 4K EQs are a little more broad. Even though the 4K could get super surgical, I just think the duality EQs are a lot more pinpoint. So I think if I'm searching for 3K and I put it on a scope or meter, it's really hitting that 3K. I think and I could be technically wrong about this, I think the SSLEs are a little broader. So I was able to get a lot more surgical with the duality. And I think that because the duality is a more open, clean sounding console, I was able to find problems that maybe I wasn't hearing on the 4K.
Interesting.
And it could just be my 4K, honestly. I mean, I'm used to my 4K. And it sounds great, but when I opened up the mix on the duality, I was like, wow, kind of a blanket lifted off of it, which is maybe I need a little work on my console.
Now, could you share some of the secrets, maybe like on Skeleta, like what type of vocal chain was used for the vocals?
Sure.
I know on some of the songs, I believe the first song on the album, I was actually listening to it earlier today, there was just a huge choir. It sounded majestic, very beautiful.
Yeah.
Give a little tips or hints on what vocal chain was used during that?
Sure. The recording, I can tell you, was a U67, I believe. And I think most of the time was 1176. I think they did most of the recording at United, I believe, in Stockholm. But I could tell you on the mixing chain, so any EQ was right from the board. All the EQ is right from the channel strip. Now, with Tobias's voice in general, Tobias had like a very like mid-range push to his vocal, like that 2 or 3K range. So what I do to sometimes soften that a little bit is a plugin that I'll always have on his vocals, a decapitator. I'll always have the decapitator on before I EQ, because what the decapitator does to me is it kind of softens that edge a little bit. Yeah. Now I don't use it, a lot, as maybe like a dB and a half, and probably 50% wet. So that's kind of after a de-esser. So I'll use a de-esser, and I believe on that record I was using it's from I think it's called Velvet from Isotope. That was the de-esser. That was first, and then I was using the decapitator, and then I'm an 1176 and an LA2A guy. That's all I use. I don't use a lot of tricks and toys and crazy things. So I will cream an 1176 to where it's like 20 dB of compression.
Yes. Bury the needle.
Buried needle, yeah. And it's just not moving. The vocal's not moving because I like to have your vocals like right in your face, right there. It's not moving. And then after the 1176, I'll have an LA2A just because I like the sound. It's not even compressing. I just like the roundness of the LA2A. And then after that, I'll have like a fab filter to just filter out some problems if I hear them, some low end, or maybe a little mid build up, like maybe 300, low mid, sorry, that's like low end. Like 360, I'll kind of filter out a little bit. And if I hear a little too much, still mid-range push, I'll just use a dynamic EQ on the fab filter. And then I'm still using a Waves L1 limiter at the end of all my vocals, just because I like the drive that the L1 gives. And I have to say that chain is about this. It's always that chain. Other than the decapitator, like I just finished mixing Bowling for Soup's new record.
Oh, sweet.
I think it's the exact same chain, other than the decapitator.
Tried and true though, yeah. An 1176 into an LA2A. I mean, that's just, gosh. I mean, that's perfect.
Yeah, I don't go for a lot of AJ Larson is my assistant in the studio, and he's always bringing me in these new plugins that he's looking at and all this stuff that he's always looking at. He's like, "Did you try this? Did you try this?" I'm like, "No." No, and I don't really want to. I have every plugin probably in the business, because when I'm getting sessions sent to me from all over the world, I have to have all those plugins. So I open up the session how it was left off, and I want the session to be completely how the band gave it to me. Like I'm jumping around a little bit, but a band called Gojira, Andy and I mixed that record during the pandemic, I think. And that record was really well done. It was really put together. So when we got the Pro Tools sessions, I mean, it sounded really good. So I wanted to make sure I had every single plugin. Everything was how the band left it off. And then, we just went from there. So my plugin chain doesn't change that much. And even on recording, obviously I have a lot of AudioScape gear, and I use it all the time. So it's always an 1176 and some kind of LA2A. It doesn't change that much for me. I do have some new favorite reverbs that I use all the time and things like that. But as far as compressors, it's SSL a lot for me, because I have an SSL 4K, and I also have two for mixing. I have two systems. I have an SSL 4K. Then I have 32 channels of Neve summing. So whatever I think is best for the project. It's always a hybrid. It's never in the box completely.
Wow.
The SSL is a little more aggressive, and the Neve has got a little better bottom end, little like rounder bottom end It really depends on what I know I jumped around a lot. I'm sorry.
Hell yeah, man. I mean, all bases covered just about there, shit.
Yeah. I
That's
mean,
awesome.
Sorry. I made a long answer.
No, that's great. How many channels is the SSL?
So it's 40 mono and 8 stereo.
And then you have the
Pretty big
amp as well for the Neve.
Yep, 32 channels.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So since your studio is stocked with all this amazing vintage gear, is there a piece in the room that surprises new clients when they actually hear what the hardware does?
Oh man, does it surprise? I have to say, I'm a hardware guy. I have lots of hardware. I was teaching a class. I probably had about 12 students in here, maybe 6 months ago, and I was mixing a song that I produced, and everything was sounding good. And then I brought in like a local band production. So I was trying to work with some of their tracks, and I had all these plugins, and I was trying to do all this EQing and stuff like that. I was like, guys, check this out. So I immediately went to the hardware, started bringing in some hardware EQ, some hardware compression. And I was like, guys, do you want to see how easy this gets? It's night and day to me. It is night and day. I use plugins. I don't use a lot of plugins because if I'm producing, I'm tracking how I want the record to sound. But it's still night and day to me. I think plugins are very good for corrective.
Yeah.
Corrective, or if you want to get an effect. And there's a lot of great plugins. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, but hardware is still absolutely the way to go. It's just easier. So I think I pulled up an SSL channel strip and like at 1176, I just started wrenching on the EQ. See all the stuff you could do. And all of a sudden the bass guitar went like, whoa, which I would have had, I was trying everything I knew under the sun to make the plugins work. And I don't want to bash plugins because I use them all the time. But there's still a big place in my world for hardware. And I think when people hear hardware, it's you know what it is? You're almost cheating a little with hardware. I think, because a good piece of hardware just sounds great,
Yeah, it would take 10 plugins to create that sound that only
it does.
two pieces of hardware can create.
Yeah.
I like that it's different too. Like everything, like different days, it's going to sound a little bit different.
Oh, yeah.
Wall voltage, everything's like, it's a unique character sort of thing where like maybe you're trying to find that one perfect take and you've got that one perfect piece of hardware. It's like a similar kind of concept, And
I used to, on that front, I used to bug out about that with my console because every channel sounds different. I used to be like, oh, this doesn't sound like this. And then once I started working with Andy Wallace, he's like, who cares? It's like they all sound like what they sound like. So then you're just working with what you have. And okay, maybe I need to make this channel a little brighter or this channel a little darker. So we're all just using our ears. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. As long as it isn't broken. And I actually think some of that randomness from channel to channel helps.
Yeah.
Because I always say it's like kind of like when you're double tracking guitars, you always want the sound to be slightly different because then it gets wider. Same thing I think with channel to channel, that they're a little different. The mix is just going to get wider and wider and wider.
Yes, those tolerances of those components, from channel to channel. I mean, a lot of those tolerances are not, especially back when they made that console. I mean, the tightest tolerance is probably 5%, maybe on the resistors, and the widest tolerance is 20-30%. A lot of stuff that's rated 20% is really more like, especially old carbon comp resistors, and now once they heat up, good luck, it's all over the place. So, but that's cool because you can start to maybe favor certain channels for different sources as well. Like as you 100%. So that's super cool.
It's like I heard Chris Laudalgi explain it really well. It's like it's your instrument. The only time it does become an issue is with recall. Recall becomes, I work around that now. I'll print my channels and, because you know how it is these days. You finish a mix and then 3 months later, the mix that was loved, there's one tiny thing. Like, well, guys, that one tiny thing you still have to. And I don't work off stems. I have to recall the mix because I don't love how stems sound when you're bringing them back. But so recall is a little bit of an issue, but now I just print all my channels. I just open up new channels and print all my SHL channels back into Pro Tools.
Good idea. It saves a lot of time.
Saves a lot of time.
Now, you recently added, was it Dolby Atmos mixing to your toolkit?
Yeah.
What does that workflow actually look like compared to a traditional stereo? And do you feel you could get lost in the mix sometimes when you're doing Atmos?
Yeah, I think Atmos is tricky, and I just had a conversation with the Bowling for Soup camp because we just finished, like I said, we just finished that record, and we're actually mixing their album in Atmos, and they were concerned because they had heard another band in their camp Atmos mixes that came back and they were crazy. That was distracting. I think you have to be. I think you have to be very, very careful with Atmos. I look at Atmos mixes as just a wider version of the stereo mix. I'll do some cool panning, but I'm more doing spatial stuff. Whereas meaning like my guitars are a little wider than in the stereo mix. The vocals are wider because I can bring some reverbs along the back. But unless it should be this crazy panning thing, I don't do it because it's really distracting. Because if you're listening to a song, then all of a sudden you hear this.
Yeah,
you know, it's like
a roller coaster. Yeah.
I don't like it. Now I think some music, great, but most of the stuff that I work on rock, I'm just trying to get a wider version of the stereo mix, and I'm trying to get it to sound just as powerful. Because what happens is, you guys know, is once you start making stuff wider, you lose the center, so you lose some of that punch. So I'm trying to get my Atmos mix as punchy as a stereo mix, but much spacier. Yeah, I love the format. I think as more people understand how to listen, and that's also something I do. I make my Atmos mixes so you could just put on any pair of headphones and it won't sound bad. Good. It may not sound incredible, but it's not going to sound all messed up, because I've heard some Atmos mixes where there's just too much going on. But yeah, I love the format.
Now, did you mix Ghost? Was their album mixed in Dolby?
Yeah, so I'll give you that quick story, and I'm going to make this one quick because I don't go on forever. I don't know. It's the New York Italian. We talked forever. And I was like, go on and on. So when Andy and I mixed the Ghost record in Para, I believe that was maybe 2022. I had gotten a call from the owner of the label, Ryan Wally, and he's like, do you mix in Atmos? And I was like, yeah, all the time. I honestly didn't even know what it was. I kind of knew what it was, but not really. I didn't have an Atmos room. I didn't have anything. So I was like, yeah. He's like, oh, because we're thinking about doing Ghost catalog. So it's their entire catalog, which is like 80-something songs.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So I was like, yeah, of course I could do it. And it was like they needed it in like a month or 2 months or something like that. And I didn't even have an Atmos room. So that's been my philosophy forever. I just always say yes, and I figure it out. So I put together this makeshift Atmos room in my Studio B, like a corner of a room. And luckily, I have my friend Daryl's an amazing tech. And I mixed the record. I had some friends that would give me tips, and we didn't have one revision.
Wow.
And when I went to Stockholm on the last trip, that album in Para is what Dolby Atmos uses for their rock demo. That was my first ever Atmos mix.
Damn, Skippy.
I guess it's not knowing.
Cool.
But yeah, it was cool because that catalog basically paid for my Atmos room. Now I have a beautiful Atmos room, and I know how to do it.
Always take the gig when offered, no matter what.
Yeah, always. We'll figure it out.
Now, recently you had a session with Rick Beto.
Yeah.
In the studio.
I love Rick.
Can you tease a little bit about that was about? Because his channel has just been blowing up the past 18 months.
Rick is awesome. Rick has do you guys know Rick at all personally, or? No?
Yeah, he actually just reached out and bought a 76A because I think he did he did something with Nick and
yeah, Nick.
Yep, and he had one and he wanted. I guess he just really fell in love with it and wanted to grab it. So that's basically all the only interactions we've had with Rick. So he seems like an amazing guy, though.
Oh man, he's like the nicest guy in the world. So how I met Rick was Andy Wallace. Do you guys know Andy Wallace, the mixer?
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
Hell
Andy
yeah.
doesn't do any interviews. Andy doesn't do interviews, doesn't do any press. He just works. You know, he's like very behind the scenes, very private. He did he agreed to do an interview with Rick in my studio. At the same time we were doing Mix with the Masters. So Andy and I were doing Mix with the Masters in Studio A, and Andy was doing his interview in my live room in Studio A with Rick. So I met Rick, and I only talked to Rick that day for maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And then Rick is like really smart. He called me a couple days later. He's like, Dan, I was listening to Ghost, Skeleta, and he's like, Dan, those are not the Andy Wallace samples. Those are not the right samples. And I'm like, what do you mean? What? Because Andy has these very particular white noise samples that he uses. He's been using them. It's on every record. It's on from. If you go back and listen to Andy's records, he's just tuning them a little different with EQ. It's almost like it's this white noise that he uses to like trigger reverbs and stuff. So Rick has such a good ear. He's like, I'm telling you, those are not the original samples. Turns out he was right. Andy had lost his samples years ago. So Rick had gotten the samples from Linkin Park's original producer. I can't remember the guy's name. So Rick gave me the original samples again. So now we have Andy's original samples.
Oh,
So,
cool.
but that,
He just kept working. He's
Andy,
like,
Rick was picking the whole thing apart. I'm like, what are you talking about? I didn't even know about original samples. And this is that. Then he sent them to me. He's like, listen to the Linkin Park record. I'm telling you, those, you know. So, yeah, I guess Rick knew a lot about Andy's career. So Rick got me the original samples. But I love Rick. I talk to Rick probably once a month.
That's awesome.
And then, you know, he was up in my studio. Maybe that's why he bought the 76. No, you said he was up at Rick's, but I have them too, and I always hype up AudioScape gear, so you know,
oh,
I have a lot of it.
The what I love about that story actually is that like Andy just lost the samples and was just like probably whatever and just kept working.
Absolutely,
like,
whatever.
We'll make some new ones.
Yeah.
Like I guarantee he didn't skip a beat. You know,
Andy is just to say, like, Andy has golden ears. Andy's, you know, getting older now. He's maybe 78 now, maybe something like that. Andy is the best listener I've ever seen in a session. There is absolute 100% concentration on the mix. He's not looking at cell phones. He's not taking phone calls. He's just listening and turning knobs, listening. It's a really incredible thing to see. He's not distracted at all by the outside world. He's just listening, and it's very, very basic what Andy does. I don't want to say like he doesn't know. He doesn't care. He's just listening and turning knobs. He's not even thinking about what frequency is that, what's the compressor doing. He's just listening. So I definitely picked up some of that from Andy. That's been one of the, you know, the least distractions, and don't get bogged down by the equipment. Just listen.
Yeah, what an honor to be able to sit next to him and befriend him and just kind of watch him work.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he's a legend in his own right within the mixing industry. He's just phenomenal. I believe all the records we listened to in the 90s, I mean, all the huge records.
You open those books, his name's right there. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and he's like the nicest person in the world. He's most humble. Yeah, and I couldn't say, he's great. I can't say enough good things about Andy.